Hello, welcome. Stuart here, the unrepentant atheist. I apologize for the grainy picture quality. I must invest some money in a decent cam. I just use the cam in my laptop, and obviously it's not brilliant quality, but anyway, at least you can see me and hear me. Hopefully you can hear me when eventually somebody comes into this live stream. um, so I'm going to be talking about the After Dark, the line call-in show that Matt Dillahunty did with Skeptics and Scoundrels. So I watched that this morning, Monday morning, as I always try to watch The Line, 2 episodes. I usually watch the Matt Dillahunty one first, and then if I've got time, I'll watch the other one. And we had, who did we have on the other one? It was, which actually went out first. It was Jimmy, and it was Eve. Eve was framed. So I managed to watch one call from the Jimmy live stream. So I'm just going to talk about that briefly first. Howard's call. Howard, who I believe is, well, he denies that he's a flat earther. I think Jimmy sort of summed up what he claims to be, like he's a, what did he call himself, a globe earth agnostic or something like that, or I don't know. But Howard, I've heard Howard call him before. He's from Britain, and I believe that he's a theist. He's a conspiracy theist, and he's potentially a flat earther. And he called in with the point, which I've heard from conspiracy theorists, because obviously, as I've mentioned before on my channel, my best friend is a conspiracy theorist. He knows that I'm a skeptic, and he knows that I don't readily accept claims, particularly extraordinary claims about secret societies, conspiracies to reduce the world population, etc., etc. He knows where I stand on these things, mainly that I'm not convinced that these are a real thing because of lack of evidence. And when I ask him what is his evidence, there doesn't really seem to be a lot of substance there. Oh, he's seen on a forum this, and he's seen that, and he's got some document that was downloaded and translated from a French original, and it says there that we're going to have this great we're going to have this great reset in the year 2023, but it wasn't the right time. Now they've put it back to 2025, but there might be one in 2030. And it looks to me like this is just something which is being pushed back all the time, a bit like end times predictions, that there are the end times coming, and okay, it doesn't happen. It didn't happen in 2012 when the Mayan calendar lapsed, and a lot of people wrote books about that and made money. And when they were called out on it, they said, okay, yeah, it didn't happen because the conditions weren't right, but it's going to happen later on. And they keep just pushing back the date, and they can do that, and people will just keep buying into it. So I'm a skeptic about everything, all manner of claims, but in particular, extraordinary claims. So yeah, my friend says to me, if you're such a skeptic, why aren't you skeptical about what the government is telling us? I'm just going to have a look at the chat to see who's in there. Sorry, excuse me a moment. Okay. Yeah, Michael Bell. Okay, it's amazing how many theists are also conspiracy theorists. I wonder actually whether it's, I mean, what makes you say that? Why do you think that it's more theists who are conspiracy theorists are more likely to be theists or not? I've seen some. I mean, my friend is he doesn't believe in a God. He doesn't believe, so he's an atheist in that sense. He believes that the religions have got some truth to them in the sense that he thinks that they point to alien civilizations colonizing Earth, and enslaving humanity. Yeah, that's what he thinks. But at least it's not a supernatural claim. So that's got more credibility in my eyes than there being an actual God, oddly enough. And I consider the claim that there are aliens ruling the planet, and in particular, uh, reptilian aliens, a completely ludicrous fantasy. So imagine what I think about claims that a God exists. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, Michael Bell says theists and conspiracy theorists lead little to no evidence. Well, as my friend says, when I say to him, "Why do you believe these things?" Because I don't really believe them, he'll say to me that, "Well, I haven't done the work and the research that he's done." And when I ask him what research and work he's done, he does not give me one single credible source. And when I say to him, well, where are your credible sources? He'll say to me, well, you won't get the truth from mainstream media, mainstream academia, because they're all part of the grand conspiracy. You need to look at alternative sources. Now, I don't know if he reads Nexus magazine. I've never bought a copy. Maybe I should buy a copy. I see it in the newsagent, so there are obviously people in my locality who read these things. But reading Nexus magazine, it's just like a kind of fantasy comic. It looks sort of scientific when you pick it up and you look through it. It looks like it's it looks like a credible magazine. When you pick up Nexus magazine, it looks credible. But when you actually start reading through it, you're just seeing all the claims that appear in the so-called alternative news media. And to me, alternative news is a bit like I don't know what we used to have a joke about alternative comedy. You know, there's comedy and then there's alternative comedy. And somebody once said alternative comedy, you can read into that, i.e., not funny. Well, actually, no, because Monty Python are, I suppose, alternative comedy. And to be honest with you, they are really, really funny. So no, that doesn't work. But alternative news to me means false news, fake news. The problem is that I really need to go and investigate a lot of these false news claims because I haven't really done that to any great extent. I'm just assuming that everything in Nexus magazine is probably not properly researched and is not really credible. So this is one of my projects. I'm going to buy a copy of Nexus magazine. I'm going to research it and I'm going to do a broadcast on it. So that will come another time. But just coming back to Howard. So yeah, he's called in before. He's called in a few times before. I don't know if any of you guys heard his call, but he was calling specifically about secret societies. He said that he used to be a Freemason. Excuse me. So he said he used to be a Freemason, so he knows about all these things. And again, you know, my best friend, who's also into secret societies, he's into the Illuminati, the Bilderbergs, of course, the Freemasons, and he even knows about all the different degrees of Freemason, right up to I think the 33rd degree, the Master Freemasons, those right at the top. He knows about all of it and all of the imagery, like the eye and all this stuff. And he'll show me a banknote and say, "Look, you know, there's a symbolism of the secret societies." And really, it comes down to I agree with what Jimmy says about Howard and about conspiracy theorists in general. I've actually written down what he said. He says you have to desire, yeah, you tend to desire to see conspiracies wherever you look. If you're in the conspiracy theorist mindset, you're going around and you're looking for conspiracies. You already believe that these conspiracies are happening, And so you're looking for significances and signs to support that worldview, that there are in fact these conspiracies going on. My friend got excited when I said to him, because there was a young man recently who died in Tenerife, a young British man, 19 years old. And I sometimes watch crime programs, investigating ongoing cases. I mean, I don't waste time watching. I don't actually waste my time sitting in front of my laptop watching those programs. I work, and when I'm doing something in my work which is fairly mechanical and I don't really need to do much thinking, I'll listen to something, whether it be The Line, some atheist program, or a debate, and sometimes it can, something like that, something on the news, or in this case, this young man, Jay Slater, who mysteriously vanished and his body was found down a ravine. And I watched one or two slightly speculative programs about that, where the question was being asked, why was he trying to get home by that route? He was mixed up with drug criminals, etc. Maybe he took something and he was trying to get away. And maybe the reason the police delayed on reporting is that they don't want British holidaymakers to think that Tenerife is rife with drug trafficking, because they won't want their sons and daughters going there, and they won't want to go there themselves. It seems quite plausible that they would want to cover it up. And he got quite excited when I externalized and said, well, I want to caution you that I've listened to these programs, and they're highly speculative, but this is what they say. And this wasn't me saying that I believe in what they're saying, only that it's plausible. It's not an extraordinary claim for the police of a popular tourist destination to try and cover something up. And we've seen in Turkey, for example, British holidaymakers dying of food poisoning in hotels, and them trying to cover it up, and the hotels trying to say, no, there's nothing wrong with our hygiene facilities. We've seen cover-ups because it's a lot of money. So it's quite plausible. I repeated some of these claims to him, and a lot of those in the mainstream media have been dismissing these and saying, well, let's wait for the investigation, etc., etc. Let's not jump the gun. So I repeated some of these claims to him, that maybe there is a cover-up, and I think that's quite plausible. Although I haven't got any evidence, and I admit that it's speculation, and I would not be prepared to stake a few pounds of my money on those claims. Nevertheless, I'm saying to him that this is what is being said by certain YouTube sleuths. But I've got no way of confirming if this is true, and you should treat these claims with caution. Okay, that's the difference between me and him, because when he tells me about various claims concerning alien civilizations, secret societies, the Great Reset, he never qualifies what he is saying with a caution that these are just things that I've read on the internet and I can't confirm them, and in fact they may not be true. Because I admitted to him about some of these theories about Jay Slater, that none of this might be true. It may well be that he did not take anything from anybody, that he just genuinely got lost and he slipped down a ravine and he died. There may be no cover up at all, but it's plausible that there is one, and we'll find out in due course. But go and check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. So when I repeat anything of that kind, which I've seen, I always caution the person that I'm telling that this may well in fact be untrue. I don't believe it myself, but it's plausible and it's a possibility, and it may turn out to be the truth. Whereas conspiracy theorists tell you things, they talk about it as if it's true, that they've confirmed it and they fully believe it. That's the big difference. And that's why I think I'm justified in calling myself a skeptic, because I will never put my name next to a claim unless I think that it's reached a certain level of credibility because of the evidence. Okay, yeah, so that's Howard's call. Yeah, he talked about with the flat Earth thing. He talked about this thing called primary observations. This is crazy. Primary observation. My primary observation tells me that the sun is the size of I don't know, a 10-pence piece, or let's say in America a silver dollar or whatever. That's my primary observation. But we know because of science that the sun is a lot bigger than a 10p piece. So this thing about primary observations, yes, by primary observation, the Earth looks flat. The Earth looks flat, yes. We can walk and walk. Um, there are counties in England, in East Anglia, that are completely flat. I mean, there are no hills because it's land that's been reclaimed from the sea, and everything is flat. You can look; it's flat as a pancake, and you think, yeah, my primary observation tells me that the Earth is flat by direct observation. However, um, in science is the way to get to the truth of um, how things actually are, and not primary observations. The primary observation is a good way of establishing a hypothesis. For example, yeah, everything looks flat. The hypothesis is that the Earth is flat. Yeah, that's a hypothesis. Now let's test that. And then we go out and we do experimentation to find out whether the primary observations actually check out. Okay, so I've not listened to the rest of the program. I had a quick listen to that one. But before I move on to the Matt Dillahunty and Skeptics and Scoundrels, the line call in, let me first of all say one or two things about last week. Somebody was posting in this live stream an argument from contingency, from necessary existence for the existence of God. So I think that the only thing that was different about this particular argument, because I googled it and I was actually able to, if you Google, if you see a theist posting on any YouTube channel, an argument, two premises followed by a conclusion, what I suggest you do is copy it, paste it into Google, and you'll usually be able to find out exactly where it's come from. And I did that with this particular argument, and I found out where it came from. It came from it came from two philosophers. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but it came from two philosophers who have written a book. They're theists, and they've written a book on. They're theists, and they've written a book on a dozen or so arguments from contingency, and this was one of them. Except the person who pasted it into my channel changed something, and the conclusion was, therefore, necessary being exists. Sorry, no. No, that was going to be part two. Yeah. The conclusion was that something non-contingent exists, something necessary exists, and then part two was going to be, and this non-contingent thing is a being, is God, and we had to accept the first stage of the argument to get to the second stage. That was the only difference between what had been presented in this book by these two philosophers. A book that was reviewed apparently by Graham Oppy, who is an atheist philosopher, and he went through all the arguments. I read his review of that book, and his conclusion was that these arguments have got some merit, but that they're only going to convince people who are already theists, and that non-theists will be within their rights to reject these arguments on a number of grounds. Now, this argument, I copied and pasted it into my. I shouldn't have. I mean, I shouldn't really go out of my way to do this with people, but just to stimulate some discussion, and because really, I've seen contingency arguments of all different types critiqued so many times that I don't really see much merit in contingency arguments, because Well, there are a number of different reasons for that, and many of you responded to me posting the argument in my community page, and many of you did a very, very good job, and you externalized many of the criticisms that I would also externalize. I mean, not least that it's presumed that this concept of infinity can't possibly be realized in reality. So the causation argument, for example, we can't have it's said, particularly by theists, we can't have an infinite regression of causes. Why not? Prove it. Prove that we can't have an infinite regression of causes. Why not? It may well be that space is infinite, that if we keep going, if you keep going and going, you will never reach an end. You will just keep going forever. That may well be the case. It may well be that there is infinity out there. We don't know. We don't know that there isn't a regression of causes. So it falls flat on that one straight away. But it falls flat in other ways as well, because existence may well be a necessary state. So you could say that, why say that a God has got to be this non-contingent thing from which everything else derives? Why does it have to be a God? Why can't it just be that whatever happens to be in existence at the time, or existence itself, is that from which everything else derives? That is the necessary non-contingent thing, just simply existence. So there's no need to run or we can arrive there with this same argument. We can arrive at a naturalistic conclusion. We don't have to appeal to the supernatural. So there are many, many reasons, and I've seen many critiques of the contingency argument. In fact, I just want to show you something, if you'll excuse me. Yeah, so this book here has got a whole. Now, this is a superb book. Actually, it was written in the 90s. Michael Martin, Atheism, a Philosophical Justification. He goes through. I mean, look, these arguments that are being trotted around today. This was written in the 90s. They're no different now from what they were then. They're exactly the same. You can find them all in here. He goes through them all, and I mean, everything's here. There's a whole big chapter on the contingency and necessary existence argument, and there are plenty of there are problems with the premises and the conclusion as well. So if there was a good sound philosophical justification for the existence of God, I would expect it to be really big news that finally the world of philosophy has found an argument for the existence of God, which is stumping atheists. I would expect it to be big news, but that isn't happening, is it? It's not happening. I'm not seeing, there's a philosophy magazine which I leaf through in the local newsagent, and I go online, I'm looking out. I would expect that if there are theists out there who are just praying for a really sound philosophical justification for the existence of God that not only convinces them, but that is going to start to convince atheists. And then they will call up Matt Dillahunty, they will email Alex O'Connor, and who else is there? Seth Andrews, and all these people say, right, atheists, your days are numbered. You are going to have to submit to the one true God, because we now have a philosophical justification. It's been analyzed by the world's great philosophers. They can't find a hole in it. They are stumped. Many of them are actually now on their knees in the churches because they realize that there is a God. This argument proves it. This would be big news. So when somebody comes onto my channel, or I see somebody in the comments saying, what about Jay Dyer's argument? I'm not sure which one he did. Was it the teleological argument? Was it that one? Yeah, I don't know. But let's just say somebody comes on and says, nobody's refuted Jay Dyer's argument for the existence of God. And somebody will come on and say, yes, we found it, this is it. The Discovery Institute will really get hold of an argument of this power, and they will use it to the full. So there's no need for me, in particular, if somebody says, oh, I've got a new version of the contingency argument, can you go and look it over? No, I can't look it over. I haven't got time. Take it to the people who are really qualified to look at it. Take it to the philosophical journals, get it published, get your presentation of it and defense of it published, and then get back to me once it's been peer reviewed. Then I'll have a look at it. But there's no reason why I should waste time on random people, particularly somebody like this guy who's got 63 subscribers and he's been going for about 3 or 4 years. And I might add, I posted that so-called proof of the existence of God in my community page, and it generated about 150 comments in total. And he actually said, on these comments, he said, I've posted now a video explaining my argument. And for the few days, I didn't bother going to look at that video. And I thought, oh, I'll go and have a look, just curious to see how many people commented on it. So I went to have a look at it. And now his videos, he hasn't got many. He's only got half a dozen videos, and they never get more than about 200 views. Well, the video which he promoted from my channel has actually got, excuse me a moment. The video that he promoted from my channel, he's got 1,400 views so far. So I suppose in that sense, he's just used my channel to promote his own channel, which frankly, if he's just a one-trick pony, if that's all he's got, then there's not really, his channel's not going far. If he's just got one argument and that's it, and he's going to spend the rest of his life going around from channel to channel, atheist channels, smaller channels like my own that haven't got big viewership. For what reason? Because he's not convincing anybody. And it's like Graham Opie said, that only those who already believe are going to be convinced by this, and those who don't believe are not going to be convinced by it. So, I can't conceive of myself being convinced that a God exists by purely a philosophical argument, maybe even one that the world hails as being completely watertight. I would probably need more. Even if there was such an argument that looked absolutely 100%. Okay. I mean, I might be on that basis. I would say, well, according to this philosophical argument, yes, it seems that a God must exist. The only difference it would make to my life probably is that I would have to give up this channel. Say, okay, I accept that God exists, unless somebody finds a way around this argument. Yes, God exists. And then I would just get on with my life. It wouldn't really make any difference to my life, because which God is it? And that's the thing. Unless it's something like a Christian God, then, or maybe a Muslim God, if it's just some kind of generic God, unless it's going to have an impact on my life somehow, unless it could somehow benefit my life, or if there's life after death, and if Christianity is true, then if that could be proven, then yeah, I suppose I would have to do something about it, but it's not really going to make much difference. Okay, so, oh, by the way, I must say about that particular person, very well, how can I say, not a good representative of theists. Not good at all. In fact, really, based on how he was insulting people. Ah, here we are. He's here. Maybe I should, I think I'll just ignore him. Okay, so I'm moving on. Let's go to Matt Dillahunty's show, or rather Jimmy's show, Matt Dillahunty. was hosting with Skeptics and Scoundrels. Okay, there was a really interesting call that came in, I think, first of all, from an incel. Okay, so you know what incels are. Incels are self-proclaimed involuntary celibates, which I take it to mean, and from everything I understand, they don't want to be celibate, but they are. So they don't want to be celibate, but for one reason or another, they are in fact celibate. Now, this particular incel called in to say to Matt Dillahunty that in the case of incels, it's not generally known that there's a message that they're trying to get out, and there's a message that he wants to come onto the show and tell people. And so Matt Dillahunty said, okay, so what's that message? He said, well, it's the black pill message. And from what I understand, the black pill message is that because of genetics, these incels are celibate. They are involuntary celibates because of essentially, to put it crudely, because genetics have not made them into physically attractive people. They're not wanted by women they would want to have sexual relations with because of their appearance, and this appearance is determined by their genetics. And this is the message, and this black pill thing is that this is a hard truth that they've somehow got to accept. And Matt said, well, all you're saying is that some people are more attractive than others, and this is at least physically, this is determined by genetics. And well, thanks a lot, but that's not really telling us anything that we didn't know. I mean, look, generally speaking, if you have got two attractive people who have a child, say a man and a woman, are good-looking people, they generally give birth to somebody who is also attractive. I mean, I'm talking subjectively speaking now. This is the difficult thing because, as Matt said, that attractiveness is purely subjective. Yeah. Okay. So he didn't really seem to be bringing anything in, and Matt said that he was not, that this thing about genetics is not adding anything. It's just something which is so obvious that it doesn't add anything at all. Eric came in to say at the end of, after Matt had his say, Eric then said that, well, it's not quite so simple because there are people who, there are lots of factors that make potentially, shall we say, a man attractive to a woman. I don't really like getting into this because, you know, it sounds creepily like Andrew Tate territory, doesn't it? I don't like talking about this, but nevertheless, just for the sake of this call that came in. So Eric's saying, yeah, there are other factors which make men attractive to women. One of them is looks, but there are other things as well. There's personality, intelligence, of course, what somebody does, their career. So if you've got somebody who's really successful in their career, say, I don't know, say somebody who owns a law firm and is really successful and really good at that, and might actually be somebody who looks like Danny DeVito. I mean, you know, I'm just plucking somebody out there that is conventionally probably considered not to be attractive. He's short. He's not particularly, I think most people would say he's not particularly good looking, but, you know, he's got an amazing personality. He's incredibly successful as an actor. And I believe that, you know, he's had relationships with attractive women. So, I mean, there straight away is an example which contradicts this so-called black pill philosophy that essentially you're screwed by your genetics. If you'll forgive the pun, no pun intended, actually, by the way. Yeah, so, I mean, Matt actually surprised me a bit. Or he probably shouldn't have surprised me too much because he said that he'd been onto incel forums, and he basically said that they're just like a cesspit of misogyny. And to be honest with you, when I first became aware of this incel phenomenon, that there is actually a community of incels, I must admit, I laughed at first at the thought. I laughed at first at the thought of it, and I wondered what their objective was. I mean, what is the incel manifesto? What would they? I mean, what would they argue for? But because from reading the comments on the forums, I'm gathering that it's not that there are no women that want them. It's that there are particular types of women that don't want them. Women who are, say, conventionally attractive, what shall I say, slim women with sexually attractive features, pretty faces, etc., feminine features. And these are the women that the incels want and somehow think that they've got some kind of right to. And I just wonder, and they don't want, they insult, they talk about land whales, women who are overweight, and they talk with a lot of disrespect and vulgarity about women who are not conventionally attractive, which I think is kind of rich, given that they themselves sort of admit that they're the equivalent of these women that they consider not to be attractive. And nobody ever talks about the plight of women incels, and there are actually there are women who are involuntary celibates as well. I would imagine that at some time, everybody, even really attractive people, have been through some period in their life when they've been involuntary celibate. It's just, what can I say? I mean, throughout the life of an adult human being, sex is not always readily available. That's just the way that things are. Unless you're a pop star with groupies knocking on your door all the time, I would imagine that that's the case for the vast bulk of human beings. And a lot of these incels are quite young men who are developing really, really negative emotions and feelings about women in particular. And I read threads started by people saying one young man said that he'd punched his mother, and I found that really disturbing to read. And his reason for that was that he couldn't find a girlfriend because he perceived himself to be unattractive, and he blamed her and his father for passing on bad genes. And that is just absolutely, that is a very confused and disturbed young person who probably needs some kind of therapy to get into a positive mindset, because one thing that women hate is negativity. And another thing that women hate is insecurity. None of these things are going to get them the partner that they desire. So I'm hoping that for most of them, it's just a phase that they'll go through, and they'll find a way and get beyond it. I mean, they're not all, from the research that I did, they're not all like that. Some of them even try to distance themselves from those who advocate violence and force and other things. So they're not all like that, but they're not all misogynistic. And at times in my life, particularly when I was a younger man, when, by any objective standard, I was a complete and utter failure with women, I never blamed, I mean, obviously when I was a shy, awkward young man, I was, I never for a moment thought that, I never hated on women because of it. I just thought that I was inadequate in some way, and for some reason, women were not attracted to me, and realized I had to work on myself and become a better person and become a more interesting person, because I realized that women like interesting people. I thought, well, why am I not an interesting person? Why are women not interested in me? So I was thinking about myself. What's wrong with me? I wasn't. I was never hating on women. Never, absolutely never at all. Never have done, and never blamed any woman at all for rejecting me in my life. But unfortunately, there are these incels who've got this entitlement complex. And let's face it, in the animal kingdom, it's true that only a certain percentage of males actually breed. And I believe that in some species, I think I was reading that in the walrus population, only 5% of males actually do the breeding, and the rest are just like a dead weight. Well, I mean, to an extent, the same goes in the human kingdom as well, but it's nowhere like that kind of percentage. I don't know what the percentage of those men are that, so I don't know, remains, should we say, virgins all their lives, but it's probably, I mean, I would imagine it's not more than 5%, so it would probably be the other way around. So yeah, it's just one of those things in life. It's not something that anybody is entitled to. Nobody is entitled to have, no man is entitled to have sex with an attractive woman. They're not. It's not written into any rights. The United Nations Charter of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights. It's not a human right. It just isn't. It's just one of those. It's just one of those things that is not a right. It's like, I mean, I don't know what to compare it to, really. I don't know what to compare it to, but we couldn't have it as a right, because how would you address that? How would you mandate that, these needs were to be addressed? Okay, so yeah, just moving on from there then. Let me just see. I'm just going to read one or two of your comments. Just a moment, please. Elon Musk says, good morning. If there ever is a genuine proof for God, I'm going into hiding from my Catholic bride. I wonder why that is. Probably, I think that, okay. Don't pick up on Danny. He's been married to Rhea Perlman. Oh, since she was on Cheers. Really, is that right? Is Danny DeVito still married to Rhea Perlman from Cheers? They're actually a very good couple, I think. I didn't realize that. That would be well, I think they make a good couple, those two, both very talented. I mean, not just for that reason. Okay, Lee Jam, yes, he really sounded like a guy who's been turned down by women a lot. Well, I mean, join the club. I mean, how many men out there have not been turned down by a lot of women? I mean, unless you name, unless you're Brad Pitt or somebody like that, or I don't know, who is it? Clooney. I mean, I'm just thinking about those who are perceived as being, like the world's most attractive men, that, it would be difficult to find a woman that would turn them down. But I would imagine that most men have been rejected by women at some time or other in their lives. But yeah, well, not necessarily. It may well be, you don't know what his circumstances are. It may well be that he's got too many insecurities to approach women, or if he's doing online dating, if he's doing Tinder, it may well be that he's putting his profile out there and he's getting absolutely no matches, or he's only getting matches from, I don't know, women who are in their 70s or something like that. that might be the case. Or he's having to put up a fake photo of somebody else to get any matches at all. Yeah, that may well be the case. Language of Forces. Hello, nice to see you here. He was talking about the black pill and what is considered attractive. It was a bizarre call. Yeah, well, look, obviously attractiveness is something which is very subjective, but I suppose, let's be honest, that if I personally, shall I say that if I personally selected, let's say, 50 photographs of different women that I personally find attractive, from the internet, let's say that I went on to I don't know, a model's website or something like that, I picked it. No, Um, not a model's website, because obviously they're only going to be models if they're sort of considered attractive anyway. But if I somehow picked out 50 women at random, but to my own taste, and put them out to you guys, you guys out there who are straight males, the odds are that out of the 50, you guys would probably agree with me on quite a high number. And if I put in there, say if I put in there 5 women who I find unattractive, the odds are that you guys would say, oh yeah, if I said, right, pick out the 5 I've found unattractive, most of you guys would probably get it right. Because look, let's take, this is going into crazy territory, but let's just explore this for a moment. Because yes, I agree that attractiveness is subjective, but nevertheless, we all seem to a lot of us agree there are some sort of generalizations we can make. I mean, if I put out there, say, let's take, I don't know, say an attractive woman, Taylor Swift. I think she's quite attractive, actually, Taylor Swift. I mean, she might not be to everybody's taste, but let's say Taylor Swift. If I picked out, say, 45 women in Taylor Swift's kind of attractiveness category, and then I picked out 5. I'm trying to think of an unattractive actress, somebody who I don't find attractive at all. Who is there? Well, okay. I mean, let's say Bette Midler. I mean, this is going back 30 years. I can't think of anybody else, but I never really found her particularly attractive. And if I picked out 5 like her and I put them into a pot of 50, I bet that I'd almost be prepared to bet money that if I chose 100 of you guys who were straight males, you would probably be able to sort out the 45 from the 5 to quite a high degree of accuracy, which is kind of suggesting that there are some general agreement about what constitutes good looks. So, yeah, I mean, we can say the same is true of men, because I've noticed that women go for certain types of looks in men. And when I see guys walking around, I occasionally see a guy that I think, I mean, I'm not gay, but I sometimes think, oh, that guy's really, I wish I was as good looking as he is. Wow, he really looks the business. And so, I mean, again, with men, there are some, yes, it's subjective, but I think, as Matt Dillahunty did concede, there are some general agreements about what constitutes good looks. And I think this is what incels are bitter about, that they don't conform to what is considered, should we say, to be a hot male, a man that a lot of women would generally find really attractive, to the extent that they could fulfill their sexual needs. And so their response to this is the black pill. And yes, it is depressing and disturbing to read the mindset of some of these guys. So I think most of those forums have been closed down now. And it's quite disturbing that we've seen terrorists, not terrorists. We've seen school shootings, and we did see, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the young men had gone in and shot up a school, and he'd said that this is the incels striking back. That was quite a disturbing development. And I think maybe to an extent, those who are doing the mass shootings in the schools and other places, they may well be young males who have struggled to fit in and have struggled to form relationships. They may be incels, even though they've not left any messages behind to say, I'm fed up with life because I can't find a partner, nobody likes me, etc., etc. But I would think that if they had somebody constructive and good and some love in their lives, they probably wouldn't have gone down that route. And that they're just the tip of the iceberg, that there are literally millions of young males out there who are young and frustrated. And the internet makes it worse. Social media and all that stuff, you look at your feed, you see all these beautiful people who are happy, you see couples, and if you're young and feeling resentful, you're not getting validation from women, you might start to, that can kind of fester and it can gradually degenerate the mind to the extent that you start to feel really resentful and maybe even violent. Unfortunately, these things very, very rarely happen. Very, very fortunately. So it's an easy trap because look, we live in a very materialistic world, and it's easy to count other people's money, and it's easy to count other people's good fortunes. Somebody once said to me a long time ago when I was, trying to get by, trying to get some momentum going in the world, when I was getting into business and things were not really going too well at first, and I was saying, oh, look at, Richard Branson. He's a British entrepreneur. Look at him. He's already worth. When he was in his mid-20s, he already had like a chain of record stores, and he's already worth millions. And somebody said to me, focus on what you're doing. It's a miserable business counting other people's money. And yeah, it is, absolutely. And it's a miserable business counting other people's good fortunes. It's best not to dwell on that. But because of the internet, it's in your face all the time. And I can see how people could get resentful because they see a lot of happiness around. They see a lot of people having a good time, but it's maybe not fully representative of what is really happening out there in the real world. Because look, when you're happy and, when you're having a good time, and I suppose if you're good looking and you've got a great looking girlfriend, you want to tell the world and you're going to put it out there. And you put it out there, and these guys see people having a good time, and they're sitting at home in a darkened room, watching Pornhub or something like that. And yeah, I can see how they would feel resentful. But anyway, enough of this. It's not. I don't want to get away from the religion, but only because incels, it's like another group. It's like a subculture, isn't it? Quite a disturbing one. And it's not a religion, but it's definitely a subculture. And there is a problem there, definitely. Okay, let me just have a quick look at your comments. Oh, Danny separated from Ria in 2017. Okay, well, that's a shame, but, hopefully, well, I mean, I divorced as well. I don't know what to say. They obviously made that decision because they weren't happy. And I hope that they'll find happiness. Okay, somebody's saying, I've heard a study where they put 50 people in a room and have them mingle for a while and then ask them questions later. One of the questions is list the most physically attractive people. Well, yeah, and the top 5 is always the same. Yeah, well, it doesn't really surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all. And yeah, okay, I suppose that's fairly obvious. People are incredibly predictable in their taste, and I suppose that men are probably more predictable than women in terms of what they'll go for. And just to throw in another very quick case here, which might amuse some of you, they found a model, or an attractive woman, a very attractive woman in her 30s. This television program, it was like a kind of sting on married men, traveling salesmen. I actually saw the program. So they planted her in a bar in this hotel where it was known that there were lots of traveling salesmen, business people passing through and staying overnight at this hotel, and particularly married men. And they had this woman in a cocktail bar, beautifully dressed, beautiful woman. And, what can I say? Really lovely woman. And out of the 10 men that she approached and invited them to her room, out of the 10, I think that 9 said yes. I can't remember why the ones didn't say no, but 9 said yes. And not only that, 9 married men went to the room, and when they got there, they were filmed, from what I remember. And there was, they were questioned, said, look, you're married. Why did you say yes to this invitation? And well, I mean, it's a bit of a silly question, really, because they were tempted. That's why. And I mean, it seems to, if something seems too good to be true, I mean, the old adage applies. I mean, frankly, if I went into a bar and a beautiful woman came up to me, told me how wonderful I was, and let's have a nightcap in her room, I wouldn't believe it, and I wouldn't go for it either. I'd be that 1 out of 10. I mean, even not married, not attached, I wouldn't be the one to go to that room. I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it because I know, obviously, that's just something that has never happened to me in my life. And I mean, a woman of that caliber, I just wouldn't. I wouldn't think there'd be a catch or there'd be some kind of danger that I would get to the room and there'd be some guy behind the door with a baseball bat. No, I would definitely say no. And in fact, I have said no when I lived in Russia for a year. I met a really attractive woman when I was out, and we spent some time together in the city in St. Petersburg. She was really glamorous, and she said, "Oh, be more comfortable back at my place. Do you want to come back to my place?" I said no. I said no, no, no. Well, I didn't say no, no, no. I just said no. I said it's really nice of you. It's been nice meeting you, but no, it's okay, thanks. And the reason for that is that um, I just thought there might be some danger. My sort of instinct told me, or not just my instinct, my reason told me that I don't know who this woman is. I know that St. Petersburg is a kind of a bit of a dodgy place where you could be robbed, or worse, people will kill you for the contents of your wallet. And she might well be going out and around trying to pick up a Western guy. And I just said no. I said, it's been nice knowing you, but anyway, I've got to get off now. I didn't even take a phone number. So no. But, most men would probably have taken the chance, just on the chance of that pleasure that they might have had. And no, I decided to put my own safety first. Let's have a look. So talking about Taylor Swift, yeah, I mentioned Taylor Swift as an attractive woman. She is attractive. I don't like her music, but I mean, her music is all about boy-girl love, breakup, and everything, and she's geared towards teenage girls, not me. But I think she's quite attractive. Taylor looks like she would burn all your stuff when you work out how crazy she is while dating her. Well, I don't think I'll ever get the chance to find that out. Okay. Okay, there's some funny stuff going on in chat. Physics police. This is a well-known problem for attractive women. They get turned down more than you might expect, especially tall women. Well, I mean, I'm 6'2", and my limit on, well, I mean, I say my limit, but I mean, the height that I like for a woman is about 5'6", 5'7". So I've dated women up to, in the past, in terms of relationship, 5'10", so I'm 6'2". Much taller than that, I don't know. But yeah, tall women, I suppose, would have a problem because there aren't many, I mean, I'm above average height, but I think the average height for a male is about 5'8", 5'9", something like that. So obviously a 6 foot tall woman wanting a taller male is going to be, I suppose, struggling a bit. And if she finds a shorter male attractive, I suppose that male might find it a bit intimidating to go out with a taller woman, or might not want to go out with a taller woman. And in my case, I don't really want to go out with a taller woman. So, okay, let's have a look. Okay, so eat honey, be happy. Yeah, I do eat honey, and I mean, I'm kind of happy, but not because I eat honey. Do you like Pink Floyd music? Yes, I do. I do like Pink Floyd music a lot. I think that Pink Floyd are like the pinnacle of the progressive rock movement. And as somebody who listens to classical music and admires the music of Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, etc., I think Pink Floyd, when I listen to some of their better, some of their greatest works, like The Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Wish You Were Here, The Wall, in particular, The Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here. I think when I listen to that music, that sounds to me like, almost like the classical music of the sort of 70s. Yeah, very impressed by Pink Floyd. So particularly Dark Side of the Moon. I didn't listen to The Dark Side of the Moon until years and years after I listened to The Wall. I don't know why. I just, I got into classical and I just sort of never bothered much with pop music for a while, or rock. And then I thought, oh, there's a lot of hype about Dark Side of the Moon. It can't be as good as people say it is. Surely I'll be disappointed. But no, I wasn't disappointed at all, and it was worth the hype. It's a phenomenal piece of work. Yeah. Okay, let's move on from music. Okay, so then Mohammed called in. Now, believe it or not, well, I'm sure you probably will believe it, the most common name in the world is actually Mohammed. I looked this up last week because somebody asked me a question. A child asked me a question. What's the most common name in the world? And at first I said, oh, probably John or Mark or Paul. And I said, well, the best way to find, I said, but I don't know for sure. We need to look up and have a look on Google and see if we can find out the answer to this question. And yeah, it turned out to be Muhammad. And I thought, oh, of course. It's like every third Muslim is called Muhammad. So, okay, yeah. There are a lot of Muhammads around. So, okay, Muhammad called in. And his story is that he grew up a Muslim. By the way, if anybody's having trouble hearing me, because I'm just using the mic in my laptop, let me know. Let me see, what time is it? I've been going just over an hour. Yeah, that's fine. It might amuse you to know that the last time I did a live stream, not last Monday, but the Monday before, I actually consumed all my data because I use my mobile as a hotspot, and I've got 80 gigabytes of data a month, and I run my business on my mobile phone. I've got an eBay business, and the following day I ran out of data. But what's going on? And I couldn't work on eBay. I couldn't print out my shipping labels. But what the hell's going on? It took me a while to realize. I had to phone up Vodafone, and they said, oh, you ran out of data. And I thought, oh my God, these live streams. So I had to purchase top-up data. And I'm now being careful with the data that I use because that was quite a shock. I need to go on unlimited data. These live streams really consume the data. Okay, yeah, so Muhammad, so his story is that he grew up a Muslim. And it seems from what I can gather that he married a Christian woman and that he started going to a Christian church and he converted to Christianity, but he never told his family. Imagine that, a Muslim converting to Christianity and somehow leading this double life. He's still meeting with his family and they think he's still a Muslim. They don't realize that he's converted to Christianity. And Matt made a really good point, actually. He said, if you were from a family of atheists and you converted to Christianity, would you have the same issues telling a family of atheists that you converted to Christianity? I can imagine that probably wouldn't be such a big issue as a Muslim saying that they're now an apostate to their family. I mean, Christians can take it quite personally when you reject their religion. If you've been a believer and you turn your back on the religion, they can take that quite personally. They can ostracize you. They can isolate and exclude you. Although I think that in Britain, that's probably less common now. I think that Christian parents, if they've got a child that comes to them, or a grown-up son, for example, who's at university, mom, dad, I'm not going to church anymore. I no longer believe in the existence of God. I love you and I hope you'll continue to love me, but I'm now an atheist. I would like to think that in Britain, because we've become sort of more secular, and that Christians aren't quite so fundamentalists and intense as, say, certain Christian groups in America, for example, and that it would be accepted in most denominations. But I think that Muslims would probably take it quite seriously if you say, well, I reject Islam now and I'm an atheist. I would imagine that would be quite a big deal for them, a really big deal, because we've seen how serious Muslims get about their religion. So yeah, he said that he went to church, and he said that he went to Christian church, and he said everybody was so kind, so warm, so smiley, and they welcomed him with open arms. And of course, this is what we call love bombing. And, I've kind of experienced that a bit myself, because as some of you know, I've been mixing in a church, a local church community. I wouldn't say I've been love bombed, but the congregation, the people that I mix with they're very kind of warm, I suppose is the word. You see smiles everywhere. And so I can understand how going into that kind of community, and especially with them not being so fanatical as Muslims, it might seem quite attractive to be a Christian, particularly if you married a Christian woman. Yeah, I can see how he would have converted. Life would be a lot easier for him if he's got a Christian wife, but apparently he got divorced. And he stayed with the faith. He went to a new church, and believe it or not, he eventually became a Mormon and became a Mormon priest. Yeah. But he said he's having to sneak around his Muslim family, and they still don't know. I think he said that he kind of hinted to one of his relatives, an uncle, that he wanted to leave Islam. And his uncle said to him, what did he say? Yeah, I've written it down here. He said, yeah, you've got no right to abandon Islam. Well, I wonder what he means by that, because everybody has a right to their beliefs. Everybody has a right to practice a religion. Everybody has a right to not practice a religion. So, but it's a big problem. It's a big problem, particularly, it must be a huge problem in Islamic countries, where we know there are atheists in these countries, and they've got to be covert. They can't come out because they literally fear for their lives. In the West, they wouldn't be killed as apostates, because obviously when you're living in a fundamental, fanatical Islamic society, if somebody says the wrong thing or insults the Prophet, you would probably feel that if you wanted to strip that person down and drag them through the streets on the back of a bus for that with other people, you would probably feel that the society would support that kind of behavior, because we know how fundamentalist and fanatical Islamic societies can be. But in Western countries, that's not acceptable. So they can't kill apostates, but they can ostracize them and isolate them and condemn them. So the conclusion on that was, it was quite a long call, really. Nothing really much was concluded about it. I mean, what do you say to some people? And I was a bit surprised in a way that he's phoning in saying to an atheist show, saying, how do I address this issue because I'm now a Christian? If he was phoning in to say that he's now an atheist, and how does he tell his family that he's an atheist, I could see some point in him calling in. But because he's really jumped from one um, you know, religion to another. Effectively, he's traded one awful religion for one that's not quite so awful. Him calling in just seemed a bit bizarre. I think that, and I think maybe this is why Matt said to him, "What if your family was atheist?" He was trying to illustrate to him that the real road to go down is the road to atheism and not to have any religion at all. So it's a shame in a way, because he was more or less implying that the reason what attracted to him about Christianity is the community. It's a shame that Matt didn't ask him, okay, well, there's no easy answer to this problem of telling your family that you're no longer a Muslim. That's not something we can help you with. You either have got to go around sneaking around like you are doing, or you've got to sit down with them and just tell them. There's nothing we can do to help you with that. But what we can help you with is finding out why you became a Christian, why you went from one monotheistic, awful religion to another one which is maybe not quite so awful. What is it about Christianity that you think is true, and why? That would have been interesting, but unfortunately, they spend a lot of time talking about this other issue, which really Matt just said to me in the end, well, contact recovering from religion. How is he going to contact recovering from religion when he's stuck in a religion? He's a Christian now. He's not a Muslim anymore. Okay, so let me just read out this comment. Eat Honeybee Happy says, the reason he converted to Islam sounds exactly like why Richard, also known as the Redeemed Zoomer, channel converted to Christianity. Christians were nice to him at a Christian youth event. Well, I get that 100%. And I see how, look, okay, as many of you know, because I'm seeing somebody who's a Christian, and I've been going to Christian services every Sunday morning, and then going to a community coffee morning after the service. I've been meeting a lot of Christians. I absolutely get this, and I said on my last live stream that what you get from a religious community is probably warmer and more open. It's more like a family compared to if you went to, let's say if you like to do paddleboarding and you join a paddleboarding club or a rowing club. I went to a rowing club recently. They were doing taster events, rowing a boat out to sea. And they're really nice people. I had a great time with them. But the kind of welcome I got from them was not the same as the sort of almost love bombing type welcome that you get from a religious community. So this is the big appeal. This is why so many people are still in religion, and why people still convert, because they get all that love, all that unconditional love from a religious community, and they've got a family. That's the thing. It feels like a family. Whereas when you go to other organizations, it doesn't feel like a family in the same way. And that's the big selling point that religious communities have got. So yeah, they were nice to him. They were open with him. They were all smiles. And it would be easy in those circumstances to say, well, okay, I'll accept Jesus into my heart and I'll recite the Nicene Creed every Sunday and I'll believe in it as well. So I'm not saying that everybody does it that way, but it's plausible that a lot are sucked into a religion for that reason. He sent him to recovering from religion, but he's still in a religion. In order to recover from, you can say he's recovering from Islam. He's not really recovering from Islam. He's got issues. He's got issues because he was a Muslim and now he's not. So he's not really recovering from that religion. And he can't recover from Christianity because he doesn't think he's got anything to recover from. He's actually getting some kind of benefits out of being a Mormon. Okay, let me move on from that call. Max called in. He says you can't prove that 1 + 1 = 2. And yeah, you can't. Matt said, well, you can. He said, definitionally, that's how mathematics works. We define the terms, and yes, we can prove that 1 + 1 = 2. So it wasn't really a very good start to the call. And he wanted to assert that, so he's saying effectively that, like mathematics is kind of axiomatic. So I believe that an axiom is like a principle that in a way doesn't need to be proven. It's just accepted. And for example, for me, one axiom would be that we proportion our confidence in a claim to the quality of the evidence which is presented in support of it. That is like an axiom which I feel does not need any further support. Of course, I could write an essay and I could support it, but I feel like it's an axiom which doesn't really need any further justification. So 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, mathematics is not axiomatic in the same way. It's a set of rules, and we define what all the operators mean and how they work and everything. So it's not really quite the same. But he's saying that in the same way that God is an axiom that should basically just be accepted. I think that another way of putting it is that God is a properly basic belief, something which doesn't need any further justification, can just be accepted as true. Now, of course, I don't accept that, because that's why I'm an atheist. But I've met people who just accept that God exists as an axiomatic belief and that they don't want to discuss it, and there's nothing that could change their minds about it. Matt, of course, rejected that. Eric said, he said that he likes axioms to be proven true before he accepts them. Well, I think the whole point about axioms is that you can accept certain axioms without having to go to the trouble of proving them true. But depending on what the axiom is, and of course, if the axiom is positing a supernatural, all-powerful being, then I would say that is something that cannot be an axiom. It's too extraordinary for it to be an axiom. And not just that, it's unnecessary. To an extent, axioms are necessary, like the one I just stated about my standard for accepting claims. It's like a necessary axiom. Okay, so that wasn't a very long call. I think it was only a few minutes. Okay, who else called? Vicky. Okay, this was a sort of interesting one. Yeah, it was an interesting one that was quite constructive, and it ended quite well, I would say. So Vicky, she's an atheist, and she's saying that she believes in she's got some supernatural beliefs, like she believes in some kind of life after death, and she's asking whether that undermines her atheism. Yeah, so the question was, why does she believe that there's life after death? She said, well, she's got 2 sons who passed away, and they visited her. So she knows that this is the case. She knows that she believes that based on this, that people's spirits, a short term after somebody dies, their spirit is capable of visiting somebody. And in her case, she says that her sons, shortly after they died, both visited her. And Matt said, well, how do you know that they visited you? How do they manifest? And she said, well, they touched her, and she heard them speak. Okay, well, how did they speak? Well, it seems that they both appeared to her, or at least they both appeared to her in toddler form. They didn't appear as full adults. That was quite sort of interesting, but not wholly interesting because I've heard these sort of anecdotes before, and we've seen we've seen dream visions in literature. For example, there's a Middle English poem called The Pearl, in which a man has a dream, effectively, that he's in heaven, and he sees his real life daughter who died when she was 2 years old. And oh, sorry, no, uh, I'm actually this is actually the other way around, because I'm realizing that in that poem she appears to him not as a child but as an adult. Yeah. So yeah, okay. I think the point is that people can have visions, and there may the person that appears to them. It could be a child, or if the child died, it could be an adult. We've heard these anecdotes, and in this case, Vicky said that they appeared as toddlers. Matt, in the end, managed to convince her that this may have been something which was produced entirely by the mind. Oh, here we are. Sorry. Skeptic and scoundrels. Let me just read your comment. I like axioms which can be demonstrated to be true in at least one case. Oh, I see. Okay. I can demonstrate the logical axiom. Okay. All right, Eric, I take your point. Sorry if I misrepresented what you said there. That's fine. I accept that. Okay, but just moving back to Vicky. So Matt managed to convince her, and she accepted, or at least I believe she accepted, superficially at least, that she could be mistaken. And I think it was probably Eric that said that there was this trauma that people suffer. Yeah, there's a trauma that people suffer, and it's a proven condition that when they lose somebody, that they could see them in some kind of hallucination shortly after becoming bereaved, and that people have reported this, and it is an actual thing. And there's a possibility that in her case, that's actually what happened, and that she accepted that this was the case, or at least she accepted that it might be the case. No, yeah, no, that's a good thing. She didn't accept that it was the case, but she conceded that it might be the case. She left that door of doubt open. But when people call in with something like this, and in her case, she had this experience. Nobody wants to believe that, especially in her case, she lost two sons in tragic circumstances. One was from, I think, one or both were from overdoses, drug overdoses, and well, obviously, as a parent, I can only imagine the grief that she must have gone through losing a child, losing not just one, but two sons. It must have been absolutely catastrophic for her, very difficult to bounce back from anything like that. And one can easily empathize with her desire to believe that in some kind of way her sons are still alive. So even though she accepted it may be the case, but I suspect that she will take away from this call that she still believes that they really are alive. That, I mean, in some kind of way, that their spirits exist. Maybe there's an afterlife. Matt pointed out that you can be an atheist. Atheist just means you don't believe in God. It doesn't mean you don't believe in an afterlife. And there are people like Alan Watts. He died in 1973, but there are a lot of people who hold to the Eastern religion, various Eastern religions, that think everything is one, and that in some way you journey on in some kind of way, even though you don't take your memories with you, but in some kind of way, when you die, you're somehow reborn into another human body somewhere else, somewhere. So even non-theists have got this belief that you can survive death. So it was good to point that out. In my case, I don't believe that. I don't believe there's any good reason for that. I believe that when you die, the lights go out forever. Worse than that, I just think that when you're dead, it's like being asleep and not dreaming and never waking up. That's what I believe is the case. But Vicky, let's have a look. Let me just read my notes. Yeah, she did admit by the end of the call, she said, yeah, she wants to believe that. So this is something which she's at least aware of, because being aware of your confirmation bias, I suppose, is probably the first step to realizing that you haven't got good reasons for a particular belief. And there was another call about bias and how can you, in fact, I'm going to merge discussing these two calls because one sort of relates to the other. So there was another call. I've got my notes somewhere on it. Let's have a look. Was it Skylar's call? Yeah, Skylar, who's called in before. I can't remember what Skylar talked about. Yeah, so the point is that Skylar asked Eric how to cut through the bias. And Eric answered, I hope I get this right, Eric. Eric answered that in science, for example, you can cut through bias by having a big sample of people, big sample of experts. If they're all saying that, if they're all saying the same thing, or if there's a consensus towards the same thing, then the likelihood is that it's probably going to be true. If it's a piece of research, and say there's an article that is submitted with various claims in it and research, etc., methodology, you can't have it. You could have it peer reviewed by just one person, of course, but the problem is that that one person might have some kind of bias, and it's less reliable. It's more reliable if you've got more than one peer reviewer, maybe from different fields, so that there's less possibility of any one person's individual bias tainting the conclusion on the claims and the research, etc. So yeah, that's a good point. Cutting through the bias. Talking for myself, I've got to admit that I've got a bias. I've got a bias for atheism. I'm beginning to think that's the case. I've been doing this atheist channel now for 2 years. And when I see an argument for the existence of God, I have to admit, this is a big thing for me to admit, because I'm going to be accused of bias. But at least I'm aware that I've got my bias. And my bias is that when I'm presented with an argument for the existence of God, particularly a philosophical argument, I'm already wanting it to fail before I start analyzing it. And it's not a difficult thing to wish for. It's not difficult to get your wish, because so far every single argument I've ever seen for the existence of God has failed. But I must admit that when I see such an argument, my thought is not, is this argument valid and sound? My thought is, I want to destroy this argument. And I admit that that's not really a healthy way of going about things from a skeptic's point of view, because it's tending towards being too biased, too closed-minded. But I'm aware of it, and because I'm aware of it, I have to make an extra effort that when I come to, like, for example, this contingency argument that was presented on my channel last week, I had to take a step back and said, okay, let's pretend I've never seen this argument before. Let's pretend that I'm not an atheist who probably enjoys being an atheist, and probably enjoys there not being a God, and probably, if a God was proven to exist, to think, oh my God, I'm going to lose my channel, and I've got almost like a vested interest in there being no God. Let's pretend that I'm a clean slate and that I've got no bias, and let's just approach this in a very scientific way. So now when I approach these arguments, it's something I've become aware of and that I try to correct whenever I'm listening to arguments for the existence of God. I used to find Christian channels so nauseating to listen to, and Christian argumentation so impossible to listen to, that I deliberately wouldn't listen to these channels. And then I realized that that was my own bias, and that it wasn't that. Maybe I'm afraid that if I go to these Christian channels, they might actually have some good points. I thought, well, if they've got good points, what is there to fear? If they've got good evidence, as a true skeptic, if I want to consider myself to be, well, let's not say a true skeptic, let's say a skeptic, I shouldn't have anything to fear from going to Christian channels and listening to their reasons for why they believe in God. So then I started going to Christian channels. I went on to Capturing Christianity, Justin Brierley. I found out there was absolutely nothing to be afraid of whatsoever. There was nothing. There were no. I found absolutely no challenge at all coming from those channels in terms of powerful points, good points. To be honest with you, I was disappointed when I went to listen to Christian channels, particularly more, shall we say, less evangelical and more academic Christian channels, when I actually started going and listening to them. Because I spent years listening to Matt Dillahunty and other skeptics channels, when I started listening to the quality of the Christian arguments, I thought, oh, this is just child's play. These are just so easy to knock down, and I've got no problem at all with any of what they're saying. So in the end, I just got bored listening to the same kind of reasoning, and I did a 1 hour show. I wrote 1 hour recording on Justin Brierley talking to somebody who claimed he'd been an atheist, and that was just laughable. His reason for turning to atheism was that he realized Richard Dawkins is wrong. It's worth going to these channels. I mean, it's just worth going to these channels to laugh. It really is. So Justin Brierley, he's got this other guy working for him in his organization. Yeah, I realized that he realizes that Richard Dawkins was wrong, and that you can't rule out God like that. Well, okay, well, I agree. And any atheist that rules out God, I would say you're wrong as well. So yeah, if Richard Dawkins ruled out God, said there can't be a God, I would say he's wrong, in the sense that as an atheist, it's not something that really you can rationally rule out. And there's no point in me having a channel and being a hard atheist, because by being a hard atheist, I'm almost saying that, first of all, no God exists. I'm putting a burden of proof on myself. And secondly, I'm kind of putting up the shutters and saying that I'm not open to argumentation and evidence. And that isn't the case. So Matt talked about peer review, which is obviously the way that science works. And I mean, actually, on just very briefly, something personal to me. As I've mentioned before, my son is working in scientific research, and he's quite excited because he got his first peer review request. In fact, he said he was surprised to get his peer review request, because he's only first year postgraduate researcher, doctoral student. And he said it's quite unusual to get a peer review request from a scientific journal. And I said, well, what is the topic that you've got to peer review? And he said to me that there's somebody else working in the same field as him and trying to achieve the same result as he's trying to achieve, but by different means. And I said to him, well, isn't there a conflict of interest there? Because if he succeeds, you might not succeed. His method might work better than yours. So isn't there some sort of conflict of interest there? Because I'm not saying you would do this. I'm sure you'll give it a fair review, but it would be kind of in your interest for his research to fail. And he said, yeah, he said that is the case. He said, yes, well, that's a valid criticism. But he said there is somebody else also doing the review. They're not just doing one review. But he said, yeah, that is a problem. That is a problem with the peer review process. That's why you need, ideally several peer reviewers. Although because there are so many articles out there that are waiting to be peer reviewed, a lot of the time I understand that there's just one peer reviewer. But for this particular article, he said, yeah, that is the case. But he said he'll give it a fair peer review. And, I trust him to do that. But it just struck me that there was a conflict of interest and that the peer review process is not it doesn't lead to perfect science, but it probably leads to as good science as we could possibly have, and that there's probably no better system in place to ensure that good research is done and that, good research is published. And unfortunately, now and again, well, not unfortunately, but we see occasionally in the news. Oh yeah, sorry. I'm doing all this off the cuff, of course, and things are occurring to me. Yeah, my son told me that in this conversation I was having with him, he said that an editor of a science journal was sacked because he was found sending articles to peer review to a particular email address, which was some kind of fictitious email address. And he was not using real peer reviews to do this. I'm not too sure exactly why he was faking the peer reviews. But the point is, he was found out. And when people do this unprofessional, unethical, and frankly fraudulent things in academia, sooner or later they're going to be found out. And that's the great thing. I've got a lot of trust in science and the scientific method, and also the peer review process. I think that the results of science more or less speak for themselves, and that on the whole, it may not be perfect, but that we can trust the peer review process. So, I mean, on an individual level, though, Skylar was asking, yeah, okay, I mean, he was talking about we all have different life experience, we all have our biases. How does that affect the way that you interpret things? Yes, and coming back to what I was saying, if you're aware of what your biases are, then it helps. It can help. You can guard against bias, and you can also get other opinions, and you can also check out other opinions. You get a wide variety. If I hear a claim, then I'll go and check out the evidence. For example, a claim. Here's a claim. Yep, I told you, my friend, conspiracy theorist, and I did a video on this. He sent me. He said that they found a 3-meter long human being skeleton in Thailand or something like that, 4 meters long. And this backs up my claim that there were giants in biblical times. I thought, wait a minute, hold on, slow down. Okay, now my bias is immediately to disbelieve this. This is nonsense. This has come out of the Bible. This can't be true. There's no record of a 4-meter long human skeleton. And my temptation was to dismiss it all out of hand straight away. I'm aware of that bias. Okay, it sounds like an extraordinary claim. Let me have the evidence. and he couldn't give me any evidence, so I had to go out and Google it. Put in skeleton, long skeleton, giant skeleton found in China. Actually, it wasn't in China. It turned out to be Thailand. I found the source of this story, and it was nothing of the kind. It was absolutely nothing of the kind. This skeleton that you see is actually a work of art that is being made by a Thai artist, and you see them with this 4-meter long skeleton. I mean, for a start, it looks like it's in far too good condition to be something that's been buried underneath the soil or wherever it's supposed to have been for, I don't know, tens of thousands of years or whatever. And what they did was, whoever took it, it's a Chinese report in Chinese, and all they've done is they've subtitled over it for those who can't understand Chinese, to say, archaeologists are absolutely amazed by this thing. Nothing like this has ever been found before. They're going to win a Nobel Prize for this. And they made it look like it was real. And I got back to my friend and I said, look, I found the Reuters, not Reuters. There's a really good website that fact checks. I've got a link somewhere that fact checks all the extraordinary claims and stories out there. And I went to that. It had the source of it, what it is, and it was really good. This website is a really good resource. And of course, I double check the website. I just don't go there. I double check, also cross-reference. And I was convinced from all my research that this was a false story. And I told him, and I sent him the Reuters link and the link to this other. And I said, no, this is false. And he got back to me and he said, yeah, he accepts that my research is correct and his research is incorrect. I said, well, what research did you do? He said, oh, my ex-girlfriend told me. I said, oh, God. Your ex-girlfriend told you? I said, what? The same ex-girlfriend that believes that pink mountain salt can cure cancer, that ex-girlfriend? He said, yeah. I said, oh, God. I said, look, do me a favor. In future, don't pass these stories on to me until you've properly checked them out yourself. But I mean, I don't trust the way that he checks things out. So, yeah, I think there's a basic rule here which kind of wasn't covered, that in terms of your own biases and, how do you overcome all the experiences that you've had in life, and how do you become a really good skeptic? I think that the axiom, if you like, that the more extraordinary claims need more skepticism, need more extraordinary evidence, is the one to hold on to. So for the vast bulk of claims out there, we don't need to do any investigation. I mean, I hear claims all the time which I don't bother to check out just because they're not extraordinary. They're nothing outside of what happens in everyday life. But, well, for example, the claim that Trump was shot is an extraordinary claim. I saw a headline on MSM. No, I mean, as MSM, it loads in automatically. I haven't found a way of disabling that. I don't want to see MSM homepage, but they usually have the how can I say, clickbait type stories. And it said President Trump shot. And I thought, oh God, that's just some fake news. And I thought I better go and check this out on the BBC. So yeah, I mean, I heard an extraordinary story. There are other stories on that feed that I don't bother to check out. Like, I don't know, sisters reunited after Auschwitz sisters reunited after 45 years. I didn't check that story out. There's no need. We've heard of these things happening before. There's nothing really. It's a great story, but it's not. It's nothing. It's nothing out of the ordinary. Whereas a president having his ears shot at, an assassination attempt, is it happens rarely enough, and it's quite a sort of extraordinary story. But I needed to confirm it by looking at the BBC, despite the fact that it's a real world kind of plausible thing that somebody would try to kill Trump. Nevertheless, I needed to check out one or two other sources just to confirm that it's true. However, if I saw a claim on MSM, God confirmed to exist. Now, now that is going to be, what am I going to do there? You know, scientists confirm God exists. Scientists and philosophers symposium confirm God exists. So what do I do there? Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, look, if it's confirmed that a God exists, it will be a single most important news in the history of humanity that will ever be in the history of humanity in the future as well. There will be no bigger piece of news than that it's been confirmed that a God exists. I would go straight to the BBC. What do they say about it? And if I see big headlines, you know, God exists, I say, okay, well, what's the substance behind this? And then I'd have to start reading the substance. Why are they saying that God exists? And I don't know, the symposium, the International Symposium of Philosophers and Scientists have concluded with full justification they've proven the existence of God by scientific and philosophical means. I'll have to start studying the detail. I still would not trust that claim without me personally studying all the detail. So, yeah, and that's what it's down to, really. In the end, it's the evidence. It's studying the actual evidence for the claim. And if the claim is extraordinary enough and interesting enough to me, I will go out and do the nitty-gritty and read through the actual detail, which is exactly what I did when I heard claims, for example, that a 5-year-old boy was recalling the life of a Second World War pilot. And a lot of people were claiming this proved that there was some kind of supernatural element to dying. And a lot of near-death experience people were using this as evidence that, well, you know, there is life after death, there's something going on, and this boy is probably this pilot reincarnated. That was interesting enough for me to go and do the nitty-gritty research to find out all the details. And I spent hours on that case researching. I made a video on it, and I discovered in the end that there was no real substance to it, and that it was the parents and some certain other people encouraging and fanning the flames of this story and encouraging it along. Because once a story starts in a small way, it can soon grow, you know. And if people are saying, oh, you've got a really special child there, you know, this is amazing. And if a family gets a lot of attention, they start to embellish things and maybe leave out details. And luckily, thanks to a very good skeptic, I think the Skeptics Dictionary or the forum attached to that, there was a really good thread. And I managed to check out all the sources. And I realized that this whole thing was just tantamount to a scam, to a complete fake. But there are still people touting this story around, unfortunately. Okay, let's see. What else have we got? Somebody from Ireland called in saying that he's an atheist, but he wanted to make an argument against abortion because if you put your ear to his wife's belly when the child's growing, you know, he can hear the heartbeat, and he's got a relationship with his child. Its hands are growing at a very young age, and this is his reason that if you're having a relationship with something, then it really counts as a being that has a right to be saved, has a right to life. Matt countered that and said, well, no, he said, you're not having a relationship with it. You think you've got a relationship with it, but you haven't. A relationship is a two-way thing. It's not a one-way thing. And what you haven't got is a relationship with it. You're just listening, and you're extrapolating a relationship out of it, and it's not a relationship at all, which I absolutely 100% agree with. I mean, when the baby's born, And when you can look into its eyes and when you can get some kind of feedback, then the relationship sort of starts to grow. And if you can at least hold the child and get physical contact with it, and you can feel it responding to you, that's the relationship growing. But when it's in the mum's belly, no, I don't believe there's a relationship there. I suppose that if the baby had some way of knowing Morse code and it could tap messages backwards and forwards with you, then maybe, but nothing like that's ever happened. Okay, so he didn't spend long. Oh God, there's another one. Milton called in, I can't go bigger than 2 hours on this. I'm going to eat up all my data. I won't be able to work tomorrow. Okay, so he had an evolutionary argument for religion. And his argument essentially boiled down to the fact that evolution seems to select for survivability rather than truth. And that on this basis, we couldn't make a good argument for naturalism, because if natural selection is indifferent to truth, then you couldn't possibly argue that naturalism is a good way to go in terms of determining the truth. And Matt, I think, countered that, saying, well, yeah, he conceded that is the case, that, natural selection is indifferent to the truth. It's all about survivability. But that doesn't mean that the scientific method is not effective at separating out what is true from what is untrue. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I thought that was a kind of a bit of a weird argument, really. I don't want to spend longer on that. I wouldn't have spent more than 5 minutes on that call. Okay, yeah, and then that went on for quite a while, that call did. And then right at the end, he said, oh, well, there are lots of theistic arguments that I'm not impressed with. For example, I'm not impressed with the argument from change for the existence of God. And Matt kind of paused and he said, well, Milton, I think that, I want to end this on a good note. So let's just get in touch next time. I think Matt didn't want to go down that rabbit hole and start off a whole new. I mean, why come on and say, here's an argument that doesn't impress me. I'm a theist. He's saying, I'm not a theist. I'm saying, Milton's saying, oh, I'm a theist, and there are theistic arguments that don't impress me. For example, we don't want to know which arguments don't impress you. We want to know which arguments impress you. And I think this was going to irritate Matt if he didn't get Milton off the line. Okay, so, well, look, that's about it, really. That's, I'm going to end this, unless I can think of something to say in the last few minutes. If any of you have got any questions, let me just read what you've been, there is one thing I want to talk about before I get off, because the coffee morning, just one more thing. The coffee morning after the service on Sunday. By the way, actually, it was one service I actually sort of enjoyed, because the minister was using, he was using somebody as an example who'd been devout, where his belief in God had kind of been rewarded. And he was talking about an athlete called Eric Liddell. Those of you who've seen Chariots of Fire will know who he is. He won a gold medal at the 1924 Paris Olympics. And he was talking about him, and he showed some original footage. I found that quite interesting, because I like that kind of thing. But of course, I didn't agree that God was helping Eric Liddell to win the 400-meter gold medal. But I believe that in the sense that Eric Liddell earnestly believed that God was behind him, that he might not have won that gold medal if he didn't have that belief. Yeah, I freely admit that religious beliefs can be useful, but I just don't happen to believe that they're necessarily true. So yeah, then there was a coffee morning, and somebody mentioned a church that was believed to be haunted. and that there was an organist in this church that didn't like practicing in the church, and he never did, because when he went to practice there at night, he believed that there was a ghost in there or something like that. So one or two of us sort of laughed at that, and this lady suddenly told this anecdote, classic anecdote, that there was this cottage that she used to, I don't know, she used to be some kind of domestic servant 50 odd years ago, and she used to work in this house, this large cottage or something. And she said that when she was there on her own at a particular time in the evening, if she was sitting in a particular place, she would get this, ooh, the sort of creepy feeling on her shoulder, and it really gave her the creeps. And then she did what a lot of people do, she said, and it wasn't just me, somebody else as well that I knew, another lady who worked in this house, a cleaner, had this same experience. She told me about it as well. So this was corroborating, she was self-corroborating her claim that in some way this cottage was haunted, because she had this feeling on her back. And I mean, look, I've been in dark places. I've been in derelict buildings where the lights are, I've been in with a torch, and I've been into basements in, old buildings. You can kind of get that feeling, that kind of creepy feeling. But I mean, I would get that feeling if I believed that a human being was in there with evil intent. I would get that same feeling, that creepy kind of feeling, not from any supernatural means. So, but I didn't make this argument. I mean, she's a sweet old lady. I'm not going to be there, put on my skeptic's hat and say, well, look, there are other possibilities. Did you consider this? Did you consider that? How did you rule out? It wasn't that kind of conversation we were having. But nevertheless, I did want to say something. And when she said, oh, my friend had the same happened to her as well, I said, oh, happened to your friend as well, did it? I said, oh, well, that confirms it then, doesn't it? Ghosts exist. Anyway, when I said that, everybody burst out laughing, because I think that they understood that I was skeptical about it. And in fact, they were probably skeptical as well. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you very much for joining me on this stream. And same time next week, roughly Monday, around about 11 in the evening, British summertime. Thanks for watching. It was nice to see Skeptics and Scoundrels, Eric. Nice to have you here and commenting as well. Goodbye, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for following my channel. Good night.